Now available in paperback and e-readers, The Temptation of John Haynes. Given to temptation, pick up this action-packed African-American paranormal romance. Get The Temptation of John Haynes in paperback and e-readers today. One of my viewers sent me a link to an article talking about Leonard Roberts, one of the stars of NBC's Heroes. And your Leonard Roberts in this account talks about all of the racism he encountered on the set of the show Heroes and how it nearly broke him. Now, after reading Leonard Roberts' story, I could relate because I ran into similar experiences when I was working at the City College of New York in their science library. So I know what Leonard Roberts was going through on the set of this show Heroes, and he came into it the same way I came into my job at the science library, thinking that this job was going to be a big break for him and he would be able to move his life and his career forward. Unfortunately, what happened to Leonard was the same thing that happened to me, in that he ran into all of this racism on the set of this show. And when I look at this whole situation with Leonard Roberts, I can see how there was practically racism from day one. Because when I look at the way Leonard Roberts was treated based on his account, he really got no real support from the showrunner, Tim Kring, who should have been looking out for Leonard Roberts the same way he looked out for Allie Larder, the white woman who made some really hostile attacks on your Leonard Roberts as related to his character and their relationship on the show. Now, the reason why I can say Leonard Roberts was practically set up for failure by the showrunner and the producers is because they really did not want to make any sort of effort in making him welcome on the set and making him a core character in the show. Now, your Leonard Roberts was supposed to be playing D.L. Hawkins on the show, and when I listened to the whole description of the character in the pilot, I could see the racism as related to his character. Now, they say that your Leonard Roberts character, D.L. Hawkins, was supposed to be described as a white man's nightmare, a prison inmate who can pass through solid matter. Now, your Leonard Roberts thought, oh, there's nothing wrong with this character, but when I take a critical examination of the character they wanted him to play, D.L. Hawkins, I see another repackaging of the Black Brute. Because the Black Brute was always considered to be a white man's nightmare. He was considered to be a black man who was supposed to be big, strong, and muscular, and he was supposed to be savage and violent prone. And when I hear the description talking about a white man's nightmare, a prison inmate who can pass through solid matter, the first thing I think about is that this is a repackaging of the Black Brute. And your Leonard Roberts thought, oh, this character didn't traffic in stereotypes, but that he didn't understand how passive-aggressive these white supremacists in Hollywood are. Now, passively, they'll present you with this character talking about diversity and inclusion, but aggressively, they will promote the same racism, because when they say a character is a white man's nightmare, they are promoting that racism. And what's sad is Leonard Roberts could not see this because this was his first series regular role on network television, and he really wanted this opportunity to work out. And because he was so eager to see this opportunity work out, he was trying to avoid confronting the racism that was going on behind the scenes as related to the depiction of his character, because all he wanted to do was work, but he didn't really understand that these racists were trying to work him over as they were promoting their stereotypes. Now, the passive-aggressive behavior continues on this hero show because after the pilot got picked up, what the producers did was push your Leonard Roberts character further to the background. Now, he was told that he was going to be introduced in the second episode, but what happened to him is what happens to a lot of black actors and actresses, because I remember what happened to actress Sally Richardson Whitfield on the show Family Law, because she was featured as Vivica Foster in the first season, brought to a regular role in the second season, but then practically pushed to the background of the second season, where she, in many episodes, only got one line. And I saw the same thing happening as I listened to your Leonard Roberts story as related to him and his role in the show Heroes. And again, he was told that he was going to be in the second episode introduced, but what happened was, instead of him being put in the second episode, what happened was he never really got any sort of contact with the writing staff, and he never got any sort of meetings with the writing staff. And he found out the hard way, what most black actors find out, is that there are no black writers on a show like Heroes, because the white male showrunners, in most cases, they're just going to hire more white males. So the whole idea of a black man having any sort of input as related to story practically disappears, because what happens is these stereotypes, they only want to write stories for white people, and really they just want the black guy to be there to be the token as related to diversity. Now, your Leonard Roberts learned the hard way about how racist these producers were, because even though the show had 3 black regulars and no black writers on staff, they had a photo shoot where all of the black actors were regulated to the back and the sides of the photo. And while they alleged they were told that they were tall, what happened was this was more of that passive-aggressive racism, where they passively, yes, include you in the back, but the reason why aggressively they're including you in the back is by saying you're not significant or important to this show. And the reason why they put these black actors in the back is because their characters are not really considered important, and that's what your Leonard Roberts found out when he was, after being told he was going to be introduced in the second episode, he wound up sitting on the sidelines until the 6th episode, where his character was finally introduced. And the reason why the producers were holding back on introducing his character on the show, as your Leonard Roberts states in the article, is because your Leonard Roberts character, D.L. Hawkins, was in this interracial relationship with Nikki Sanders, a white woman played by Ali Larter. And the producers of the show knew that if they introduced your D.L. Hawkins, a black brute type character, and showed him in this interracial relationship with this white woman, Nikki Sanders, in that second episode, NBC's hyped up Heroes would have died in the ratings. And the reason why Heroes would have died in the ratings was because most of America would have vehemently rejected this show once they saw this black man who was a criminal involved with a white woman, because black audiences would have vehemently rejected this show, because they would have seen the racism as related to the depiction of D.L. Hawkins, and white audiences would have rejected this show because they, on seeing a black man with a white woman, they would have walked away from this show, because in both cases, the audience would have vehemently rejected this show, because I know not only would white men reject this show, like the comic fans and sci-fi fans, because they did that back in the day of Star Trek The Next Generation, when Worf was out here with Deanna Troi. I mean, the ratings started to drop, and they eventually got away from that storyline. And the same thing happened when Worf got involved with Dax. And the same thing would have happened here, because most of the audience would have practically turned away. And we saw this also happen with the CW Supergirl when they had Mehcad Brooks, who was playing James Olsen, looking to be Kara's love interest. We had a whole host of racist comic fans practically reject that relationship. And the same thing probably would have happened with Heroes. And again, this is why they practically buried your Leonard Roberts storyline into the 6th episode, because they know if they put it in the 2nd episode, the ratings on the show would have plummeted like a rock. So that was the main reason why they went out here and moved him all the way to the 6th episode, because they didn't want to alienate the core audience of these white male comic fans and these white females. And they know that they probably would have lost the black female audience, because in many cases when black women see a black man with a white woman, you get the eye roll and the teeth sucked. So they were scared that if this Leonard Roberts was shown with Ali Larter, a blonde white woman, that would have been the end of Heroes as related to ratings. And your Leonard Roberts, he didn't really know what was going on, because he really just wanted to work, and he really wanted this role to be the one that make him a star. But again, he didn't understand the chess game that the white supremacists were playing. And he didn't understand that they were out here playing this game with his career, and they were getting ready to derail his career as related to this show. Now, he didn't really understand what racism was going on until there was a romance scene between himself and Ali Larter, where your Ali Larter really started to show her own racism as related to your Leonard Roberts, because she really expressed extreme contempt for your Leonard Roberts during this sex scene. And she expressed this because she did not want to be seen as intimate with your Leonard Roberts. And the reason why she didn't want to be seen as intimate with your Leonard Roberts goes back to an old white supremacist principle. Whenever a white woman is seen being involved with a black man, other white men want nothing to do with her. And your Ali Larter did not want to lose her career, and that's why she was so angry and vehement about not being in scenes with Leonard Roberts, because she feared that this would wind up costing her other roles as related to her career, and that's why she was so angry. Now, she was, as I see it, a basic racist white female, because a lot of times, again, they're all about protecting their position with white men, and she didn't want to lose her position by being seen on television with this black man, because if she's seen as the love interest with this black man, she's not going to be able to have a career in other films, because in many cases, these racists out here, they'll put you with the black man, but then what will happen is they won't cast you in any other roles. And the same thing happened on the CW Supergirl, where your I forget what her name is, but the girl who plays Supergirl, she had the same thing going on. And what happened was your James Olsen, played by Mehcad Brooks, was made into the guardian of the friend zone, marginalized and emasculated on his show. And the same thing happened years before to your Leonard Roberts, and he didn't understand what was going on, because she had this whole Ali Larter, like I forget what her name is, the girl who plays Supergirl. Let me get a second. But Melissa Benoist, that's who it is, Melissa Benoist. But the same thing, Ali Larter, it was doing the same thing as Melissa Benoist, because these white women, they understand that if you're seen romantically involved with a black man, that is the end of your career, because they cannot sell the fantasy of you being a prize in the eyes of white men. Most white men, when they see a white woman involved with a black man, don't see her as a fantasy anymore. And because they don't see her as a fantasy anymore, they don't want anything to do with her, and they don't want her in any of their projects because they believe it'll taint their projects. And that's another part of how racist Hollywood is, because again, Hollywood is about selling the fantasy of these beautiful white people being involved with these other beautiful white people. And what happened to your Leonard Roberts was what happened to him was he found out that the truth about white women as related when he started to ask your Adrian Passadar what was going on as related to a scene where Nikki was supposed to seduce him. And your Ali Larter had no problem going and getting involved with Adrian Passadar, very similar to what happened with Supergirl and the guy who played Mon-El on the show. They had a whole host of problems on Supergirl as related to James Olsen, but when Mon-El shows up, we have no problems at all. And again, that just shows us again the racism that still goes on in your Hollywood as related to black men and related to interracial relationships. They have no problem getting involved with the white man and being sexual with the white man, but when it comes down to the black man, that's when your Ali Larter, like your Melissa Benoist, was starting to get uncomfortable and starting to get defensive. And what happened here with Leonard Roberts was he was one of these guys who believed in the rainbow, but he didn't understand the racism that is a major part of Hollywood. And he trusted in people in Hollywood to help him out, not understanding that the white supremacists in Hollywood have no interest in helping out any black man, and because they are not about elevating any black man on their platform, and they're not about elevating the image of a black man on their platform. As they see it, the only image they want to present of a black man in their shows is that of a black brute, and they were trying to passive-aggressively slip that image of a black brute onto the show Heroes as a hero. Unfortunately, the whole thing is that Ali Larter did not want to be seen as a woman who loved black men on the show, and she's one of the villains on the show. But the ultimate villain I see on the show was your Tim Kring, because your Tim Kring, the showrunner of this show, he knew what, as I see it, what he was doing with this show and this character, and he could have easily gone out here and helped this brother be able to have a career on this show, but he wanted D.L. Hawkins to just be a token character on the show, and he wanted to have a passive-aggressive way to bring in this black brute and then present this narrative of the black brute. Unfortunately, what happened was he got caught up and tripped up by Ali Larter because she was looking out for her career as she saw it. But there was racism on the set of this show from day one, and I could easily see it again from the way this character was depicted, talking about white man's nightmare, and I could also see it with the way they talked about, oh, he's involved with the white woman, and I could also see how they were setting this character up to be taken out of the show, because Leonard Roberts thinking, oh, his presence was getting smaller, but the same thing happened to Sally Richardson Whitfield on Family Law in season 2. And I know that they do this to black characters on the regular on these shows, because they only bring these characters in to talk about so-called inclusion, but then they find ways to marginalize and exclude those characters. And D.L. Hawkins went from coming in episode 6 to finding his role getting smaller and smaller to the point where he was only doing one line. And then he said by the mid-season finale he had been shot more times than Tupac, which really was interesting to me because that reminded me so much of that X-Men movie where that black guy, even though he had these incredible powers, is killed off in the first 5 minutes of the movie. And he says that his character was killed off by being shot, even though he has the power to pass through solid matter. So when I look at this whole situation as related to the way Leonard Roberts' character was treated, I mean, basically, they really did not want him on the show, but what they wanted to do was find a way to get rid of him, and the producers and the showrunners were such cowards, they wanted to talk about how it wasn't about him and Ali Larter not having chemistry, when in actuality, it wasn't about the chemistry. They just did not want this black man on the show any longer because he had fulfilled his purpose as a diversity quota. And now that he had filled his purpose as a diversity quota, they were going to get the big black brute off the show the way they usually got the big black brute out of life, by killing the big black brute. So again, in between the lines, they were still pushing the narrative of the black brute, that he was out here a big muscle-bound black man, and he was involved with a white woman that he lusted after, and then they were going to have their quiet way of lynching this super-powered black man by saying that, yes, he could pass through solid matter, but if a white man pulled a gun on him, they would be able to eliminate that black man. So I look at what happened to Leonard Roberts, and again, I can see all the racism going on behind the scenes, and I can see how Tim Kring practically set your Leonard Roberts up for failure, because he really did not really actively want to go out here and give this brother an opportunity to show his talent and his acting range. No, he just wanted a token to push for his diversity quota, and he wanted to eliminate this black man after he had finished with this story. And again, these leftists, what they do is, again, passive-aggressively promote diversity, but aggressively promote passively promote diversity, but aggressively promote the same old racist stereotypes and racist stories. And this brother, he didn't really understand what was going on with this entertainment industry. This entertainment industry, again, is not about elevating black men, especially heterosexual black men, because the whole thing of Hollywood was created to be a white supremacist institution meant to elevate white men with white women. So they're not interested in elevating a black man and making him a hero, because in their story, the black man, especially a heterosexual black man, is a villain, and they want to find a way to eliminate that villain. And what they were trying to do with this show, Heroes, was in between the lines promote that whole narrative of a black man being a villain so that they could eliminate him. And what happened with Leonard Roberts is he wound up with his career becoming completely derailed by his whole experience on Heroes, and he didn't really understand the racism that went on behind the scenes. But as somebody who has studied the entertainment industry for over 25 years, I know what type of racism he went through on that show, and I know that these people from day one never had any good intentions as related to Leonard Roberts, and they had never had any good intentions as related to pushing or promoting his character, because in their eyes, white people are heroes. And they'll sit there, these leftists, they'll sit there and talk about how tolerant they are and how accepting they are. But all you have to do is look at their art and how black people are represented in that art and see where the racism was. And I could clearly, again, see it on the show Heroes. And it's sad that this brother it took 10 years for him to actually finally get a role as a regular. But this is par for the course with Hollywood, because Hollywood, again, is not about elevating black people or the image of black people. It has always been a place that promoted anti-black racism, and it's always been a place that promotes the idea of white people being heroes. And this is why most black actors need to understand why we need our own black media, because only on our own black media can we be seen as heroes, and we can be seen in a positive light, because you can't expect a white supremacist institution like Hollywood to go out here and want to elevate our image and present us in a positive light. They were always about elevating white people, and they were always about promoting these old racist ideas. And that was clear to me from what I saw with what they did to your Leonard Roberts here. And I could see it just listening to his story, and I saw the setup from minute one, and I guess Leonard thought he could play along to move his career forward, but there is no playing along with these white supremacists, because these white supremacists in Hollywood, they're not going to let you move forward. That's what Leonard Roberts found out. That's what Mehcad Brooks is finding out right now. And that's what many other black actors who participate in white shows find out. They find out that when it comes down to your role in their white production, you are a marginal piece of the show. You are a token character who comes in and says one line, or you come in and quip something funny, or you wind up becoming either a mammy, a minstrel, a brute, a Jezebel. These are the roles that white supremacy in Hollywood has for black actors, and the only way we get to play balanced, humanized characters is if we go out here, make our own productions, make our own films, and make our own media. And this is why people need to go out here, and if you want to go out here and support, black productions, that's the only way you're going to get positive images of black people, like what I produce on the SJS Direct imprint, with books like the John Haynes series, novels like Eternal Night, books like the ISIS series and the Eaststeam series, and books like the Spinsterella trilogy. This is the only place you're going to get to see positive black images of black people and see a black man as a hero. Because in books like I do, like John Haynes, The Man with Nothing to Lose, we have a black man as a CEO, not an inmate like this whole D.L. Hawkins character. Here we have an educated professional brother, and he's out here doing what needs to be done to help out his community while taking on these enemies of Lucifer's Legion. And the same thing with books like the ISIS series, where I have ISIS as the goddess next door. You're not going to see a black woman depicted as a goddess in any of these mainstream white media platforms. No, either she's going to be a swirling side piece or a bed wench, or she's going to be a Jezebel, or she's going to be one of these other types of narratives, or she's going to be a mammy. So you're not going to get those types of black women shown to you. You're not going to get black women shown in vampire stories like Eternal Night from mainstream media, but you will get it from new black media and creators on new black media like myself on the SJS Direct imprint. And they're not going to give you that respect, and black people just need to accept this, because, again, when I listen to Leonard Roberts' story, it reminds me of my own experience, and even in a small job like the CUNY office assistant at the City College of New York. When it comes down to black men, they don't want to see you in a positive light, and they don't want to see you in a humanized light. They only want to see you as it fitting into their world and their stereotypes. If you're the black brute, if you're the minstrel, if you're a joke, then they have then they're comfortable with you. And what happened to this brother is he found out the hard way that they really don't have a place for black men in Hollywood outside of the roles that were created during the Jim Crow era when Hollywood was founded. So I look at what happened to this brother, and I understand what he went through, and what other brothers are still going through, like Makad Brooks is going through right now. And it just shows me that we can't go to Hollywood looking to create positive black images. No, we have to go out here and create our own images on our own media platforms, because the only way we're going to be seen as a hero is if we go out here and create our own media on our own platforms. Now, if you want to pick up some of my positive black fiction on the SJS Direct imprint, such as the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, the books in the John Haynes series, and novels like Eternal Night, you can find all of those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them on Smashwords, Barnes & Noble, the iBookstore, and Google Play. And if you want to help me make more videos talking about fantasy and science fiction, and you want to see me be able to put out more positive SJS Direct publications featuring black heroes and heroines, you can donate to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the link in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and Kindle, Vampires Stalk the Darkness of the Eternal Night. Get your copy of Eternal Night in paperback and Kindle on Amazon.com.